With us tonight, we are bringing you some sexy and practical conversations with an internationally known escort, Alice Little.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Alice Little. I'm a legal sex worker, sex educator, and intimacy expert. I've been in the sex work industry for the past 5 years now as a sex worker. And before that, I was a BDSM educator and traveled around the country doing different educational events.
That is awesome, and you are here to educate all of us tonight. What are we going to talk about today, Christy?
Yeah, I'm already getting a little bit hot under the collar on this anniversary episode. We're going to be talking about Alice's illustrious career, from flirting and foreplay to lectures on the science of sex and the state of sex work during COVID, plus tips and tricks and practical advice for anyone out there thinking about hiring a luxury escort. So hit us up. We're at 512-991-9242, or you can call the show at tiny.cc/callsex because the show is starting right now.
All right. As we're waiting for those calls to fill up, guys, seriously, this is a big opportunity to talk with somebody who knows a lot about what they're doing. So call in. Let's start with the basics. What is a luxury escort?
That's a great question. So a luxury escort is somebody who connects with someone on a far deeper level than just skin deep. So what I do addresses somebody's intimate needs, their social needs, their emotional needs, and of course, their sexual needs too. It's an incredible way to connect with people, learn more about myself, and of course, a great way to experience intimacy with others.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you got started? I know you said you started out kind of being a sex educator, BDSM expert, and then kind of segued your way into sex work itself. And can you give us a little bit of that history there?
Of course. It's quite a funny story. I found the world of legal sex work in Nevada by way of being a sex educator. So I was traveling around the country, like I mentioned earlier, and at one of those events, a fellow educator shared with me information about working at the legal brothels. It sounded really intriguing, interesting, and so I decided to look it up on my phone, and I was so delighted with everything I saw that I decided to apply, and within 72 hours purchased a flight and was on my way to go work in Nevada for the first time.
Damn.
Yeah, it was kind of like jumping in with both feet. It was like, this seems like it could be a good fit. This will be a great fit. Yes, I will do this now. And I never looked back 5 years later.
Oh, that's awesome. That reminds me of how I decided to come to Austin. I was like, never been, don't know anybody. Let's do this.
You know, you can tell that the show is maturing and growing up into its 2 years because of all the puns we just let pass right there. We're probably gonna have to do like a bonus episode where we just go back and dissect that last sentence. But that's incredible that you had the bravery to say, this is something I'm interested in. I'm gonna learn more about it, and now I'm gonna be the best at it.
Well, it didn't quite work out that way. The focus was never on being the best or the most or anything of that nature. My focus initially was just on learning more about it, myself, about intimacy, how different people experience it, how different people fulfill their needs, and what my role can kind of look like within that space.
And did it feel like a natural fit right away? Did it feel kind of like, oh yes, this is where I'm supposed to be, and I kind of have everything I need going in, or did you feel kind of overwhelmed at first? How was that first maybe 3-6 months?
I have to say, it was kind of strange. It was almost like a duck taking to water in the sense that I looked back on my strange life experience of being a sex educator and helping out with various small businesses. And it's like, everything in my strange life has led up to this perfect moment here. I have found the thing I've been looking for. And it's just been kind of a match made in heaven for me.
That is awesome. And you do have quite a few specialties. I was going through your website in preparation for this interview and kind of looking at the various things that you offer. And there are very many, and we don't have time to get into all of them, but I kind of picked 3 that I really found interesting and wanted to know more about. So the first thing is the GFE, the girlfriend experience. So can you give us an idea of what that is specifically, and also maybe why one would seek that particular specialty out?
Yes. So GFE, or the girlfriend experience as it's better known by, refers to a connection that goes far beyond just sex. I essentially step into the role of being somebody's girlfriend, and I look to fulfill their needs far beyond the sexual. I'm a companion. I'm there to spend time with them, connect with them, share in their hobbies and interests, be there to hold them if they're going through something that's difficult or challenging, help answer their questions, help be a friend. It's so many different things kind of all rolled into one. And it's hard to say that the girlfriend experience looks like one specific thing, because it's so customized and unique to the individual. As to why somebody might choose to have the girlfriend experience with a luxury companion, it's because they're not getting those needs met somewhere else in their life, or they're not really sure what a healthy quality relationship can look like. You figure for many of us, we don't really get to see good quality relationships. They don't show it on TV. We don't read about it in books. All we see are like these examples of dysfunctional people and poor ways of communicating and not very good practices in the bedroom. And so I kind of like to flip that on its head and give people the opportunity to experience good quality intimacy.
That is so interesting. I was mulling about it, and I was trying to figure out exactly, kind of predict what you were going to say. And honestly, I will admit, I did not even think about that particular element of being able to say, hey, maybe you haven't had good experiences with a relationship, or maybe the relationships you have observed or been a part of have given you a bad taste, or in some way skewed your idea of what it is. And you kind of reset that. And I'm sure that this also plays into the whole education and coaching element as well, which is kind of where I'd like to move us next. I know that you do a lot of coaching and a lot of educating around sex and BDSM and consent and all of this. So can you talk a little bit about maybe this more academic side of things?
Yes, so our country is god-awful when it comes to sex education.
Yep.
We're virtually non-existent. We don't have any quality sex ed. If anything, we have this tendency to give misinformation in school rather than anything of quality. And as a result of that, we're left very ill-informed as to how to have a good quality sex life as an adult. I mean, I don't know about the two of you, but when I was in sex ed, the phrase women's pleasure was never even mentioned, like not even once. Once. We didn't talk about it. It was entirely non-existent. And through my work at the ranch, I found this real need for better education. People want to understand these things, but they're a little bit too shy, perhaps, to ask their existing partner or some random stranger on the internet, hey, so how do I actually find that? And then they whisper it like it's a bad word. Like, no, that's okay. I got you. You don't need a roadmap. Like, it's cool. Put down the notebook. You don't need to break out pen and paper here. Like, let me teach you the magical, mystical ways of good quality sex. I promise it's real. It exists, and it's nowhere near as complicated as you think it is. And so it kind of naturally ended up becoming something that I was known for. Previously, I was teaching BDSM-focused topics, but it wasn't really just BDSM. I was doing conversations on non-monogamy, conversations on consent, and a lot of that information also follows suit when it comes to intimacy. How do you find out what your partner likes in the bedroom? Easy. You ask them. They will tell you. They know the answer. I don't know the answer. I'm not a psychic. I can't tell you what your partner's into, but I can tell you how to get that answer, though. And I oftentimes am able to do so.
Wonderful. And can we talk a bit just about, because I know that you said you started out kind of before you got into it yourself, you were discussing it, you were speaking on it, you were educating people about these various subjects. How did you come to that as an interest? Was it something you studied in school, or did you self-educate after, finding out, hey, this is something I want to know more about? How did you get to the point where this was your area of expertise?
Well, it's funny you mentioned school. I didn't necessarily study it in school, but I sure studied it a whole lot after school. When I was in college, my roommates had a whole bunch of leather gear, like a whole lot of leather gear. I mean, like the entire back section of the closet. I distinctly remember it being just like black with leather and silver with chains and metal. And I was like, "Ooh, what's this about?" And they were like, and I'm like, "No, what is this about?" Like, I think whatever that is, I'm into it. Okay. And come to find out, one of their parents owned a BDSM dungeon in New York. Of course, I proceeded to pester the crap out of them until I was able to get a job there. I started out at the front desk, scheduling appointments for different folks that were coming in. I was setting up the educational track. And then, of course, I was getting to just hang out in the dungeon, go to all the classes. And in between people's sessions, I'd go to the dungeon. I'd be practicing different skills. And I got really into it. I eventually ended up picking up and teaching a class on vlogging completely by accident. The presenter, unfortunately, was snowed out of New York, and I had a classroom full of people, and there was no teacher, and it was something I was pretty A-okay at. I was already familiar with a lot of the motions for flogging. It's the same motions that we use in foreplay, and, well, I'm like, all right, I can probably teach a class. I can probably wing this. I've been here, for a minute now. I can do this. And apparently I did a good job because I was then invited to present at another location. And then I was invited to present at another event. And then things just kind of took off on their own, real crazy like.
Wow, that is amazing. I grew up very sheltered, very conservative Christian, and I went to a Christian university, and I cannot imagine where my mind would go if my roommate had a bunch of leather gear in the closet. That to me just, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And then I guess finally for this first segment, you did touch on this a little bit, I think, with your discussion about the girlfriend experience, but I noticed that you also offer some therapeutic offerings as well. So you've got the more intimate aspect with you as a intimate partner, as a companion. You've got the educational aspect here, and now you've also kind of got the psychological, the therapy aspect. And can you give us an idea of the kinds of things that you talk about with people who want to set up an appointment with you?
Yes. Unfortunately, many people have been deeply wounded in a sexual manner or wounded in an intimate manner where either they've had their trust broken, they've had a bad experience sexually, whatever it so may be, they've had something happen in their lives and they need somebody else to help them process everything that's happened. Of course, it can be very difficult to go to, say, a conventional therapist and process through, hey, I want to get comfortable with the idea of being kissed and being held and being touched. You can't really just go into your therapist and practice kissing your therapist. I mean, that is not the right place or time for it. However,
Christy's just like, well, I mean...
Yeah, that's a hard pass for me, dog. I'm always eager to be having those conversations, but we're talking about different kinds of therapy. Talk therapy is great and helps you to get to the root of an issue, but there's nothing that replaces the experience of actually allowing your body to move through those types of movements. It can be incredibly therapeutic to practice, so to speak.
And I'm a safe person to practice with. It's 100% consent all the way. Everything is going to be happening at a slow, consensual pace. I've gotten to spend time with folks who are recovering from just the most horrific of circumstances, things that I've never been through and hope to God I never have to go through. But I feel privileged and lucky that I'm able to help somebody overcome some of those difficulties, and that they trust me to explain not just the root cause, but then put themselves in a situation where they're vulnerable and they could potentially be setting themselves up to relive some of those experiences, and helping them move past it and help replace some of the negative thoughts and feelings with more positive ones, and slowly but surely create a new foundation in which they now get to go forth and have this amazing, wonderful, intimate relationship with others.
That is awesome. It sounds luxurious, for lack of a better word. That is awesome. Guys, we would love to talk with you about anything relating to these topics. Are you interested in what the girlfriend experience might be like? Are you interested in maybe finding somebody who would be right for you in that capacity? Or maybe, you have a question about BDSM. We've got a great resource here on the line. So call in. In the meantime, though, I do want to move into kind of how quarantine and this pandemic is impacting sex work, especially the more in-person kind. I know we've had some people on, Rudy, for example, who primarily does their work online, primarily is not being affected as much. But for those people who are actually in physical spaces and are used to collaborating with other people in a physical space, kind of let's break that down a little bit, because I think that's a conversation that's worth having.
For sure. And it's definitely been difficult, Ding. You're spot on. Those of us that do work face-to-face are those that are primarily in the risk category. And of course, we're being dramatically affected by the reality that adult spaces, by and large, are still shut down across the country. Here in Nevada, the ranches are closed and have been closed since March. Some counties are approving locations to do non-sexual escorting, but not all counties have approved of this particular measure. Personally, I'm not 100% comfortable returning in that capacity, just because we don't have testing, and my county, Lyon County, doesn't have any provisions right now for that. So there is no option. And I say around the country because all of the strip clubs, all the dance locations and venues, those are all currently closed. So you have that entire population as well that's being affected. And unfortunately, sex workers fall under the adult category, which means we are unable to receive any sort of government support in terms of the Payment Protection Program or any of the SBA small business loans. So despite the fact that the government was happy to take a lot of monies from me in the form of taxes, they have offered me $0 whole dollars and 0 cents in recompense for no longer having a workspace, which is really fun. Really fun. My voice is just dripping with sarcasm right now.
There's a little salt happening, just a little tap. So you said that your ranch is still closed, and so how have you been coping? Both, I guess, financially, as far as you're comfortable sharing, but also in terms of adapting your business model so you can practice your business in a safe and healthy way.
Yes, I had no choice but to pivot. I ended up starting an OnlyFans account and hopped on there, started educating myself as to some more of the various options for online sex work. I also started using the webcam to offer one-on-one sessions with guests and started to explore some of those various options as well. I already was on Patreon and creating content for YouTube, so I kind of just stepped it up, continued to work hard in that direction. But financially speaking, the reality is it's just a small drop in the bucket compared to what I was earning previously. And it's really problematic in the sense that I had a savings to fall back on. I've been able to get through this, but not everybody has that privilege. Not everybody had the ability to save like that. And so I worry and think as to my coworkers, what is their experience right now? How is somebody who's brand new to this industry being affected? And they're the ones I worry about far, far, far more so than myself. I've been, knock on wood, knock on everything. I've been very lucky that my guests have been supporting me. Folks have been very open-minded about pivoting to some of these online platforms. And it's really been a saving grace. It's what allowed me to keep going, as it were.
Yeah. I'm curious if you know anything about this. If not, certainly that's okay. But as we're seeing this kind of, for lack of a better word, shove of all of these sex workers into the online space, it feels like this is a very pertinent time to bring up SESTA FOSTA and kind of how that impacts it. Because at this point, this really is the only sphere that you can operate safely in or even legally in. And you're probably coming up against a whole lot of walls there too.
Absolutely. SESTA and FOSTA, for those that aren't familiar, SESTA and FOSTA stands for Stop Online Sex Trafficking Act, and FOSTA was the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, both of which were then passed into law. And unfortunately, as a result of that written language, it limits where sex workers are able to be online. For example, if I post about my OnlyFans on Facebook, that's going to get my Facebook account shut down. I'm not allowed to post over there. Not to mention the fact that it limits our Google search engine results. It limits where our content is allowed to live on the internet. It took down a number of the different websites that sex workers were using to get views. And I mean, we're not even done. I mean, that's really just the tip of the iceberg of the problems. And that's just SESTA FOSTA. We've got a new monster coming up through the ranks. This idea, the Earn It Act now that's popping up, which is impacting the way that sex workers have access to banking and are able to process payments. It's inevitably going to make it significantly more expensive for us to be able to just process the transactions, which then inevitably makes sex workers reliant upon different websites who then are able to take larger and larger cuts as a result of that limitation. So it's a really difficult time to be a sex worker anywhere in the world right now. It's real tough, but especially here in the States, it's just like we keep ratcheting up the difficulty mode. And you're right. With so many new workers coming into this space, there's a lot of misinformation that's floating around, a lack of awareness as to how do we use these platforms. I mean, I could go on a 40-minute tirade about how Bella Thorne was the worst thing to happen to OnlyFans ever. Yeah. She's canceled, by the way.
Oh yeah, no, we had an entire episode a couple of weeks ago where we broke that down and got we had a brand new OnlyFans user on to kind of give their take. And then I guess this kind of ties into my next question, which is, as hopefully, yeah, it feels like as like the longer this goes on, the more the phrase "when this is over" feels kind of like a fantasy that is
naive, yeah,
a little bit pie in the sky, just a tad. When this is over, or as we see this start to either become normalized with more testing so that places are able to open, or we get a vaccine, or in some way this starts to alleviate, what are some steps that maybe somebody who's interested in visiting a ranch that is brand new and open again, what are some steps that they can take to make sure that they're, financially being supportive, making sure that they're keeping everybody's health in mind and all those business considerations?
Yes. So we don't know what the structure will look like on the other side of this as to what the opening protocols will be. I have a feeling that there will either be a requirement as to vaccination, negative test results, something along those lines that folks absolutely are going to need to obtain in order to come to the location. Now, it's important to make note of the fact that, unfortunately, sex workers aren't legally able to quote exact rates online. So we're not able to say it's this much for this thing. We have to discuss all those details in person. So while you're planning your visit, have a little bit of flexibility with your budget, especially if you have a more luxurious experience kind of in mind. A good rule of thumb is plan in the 4 to 5 figure range, depending on how long you want to spend there, and you are going to have a very good time, and you're not going to have to worry about offending anybody. Of course, there's all sorts of different things, all sorts of different experiences, and it really ends up being up to you to decide what kind of experience do you want to have. I recommend reaching out to a lady in advance and setting up an appointment with her. This way you have an opportunity to email back and forth, get to know her a little bit better, make sure that she's going to be a good fit for you, that she offers the service that you're actually interested in, especially if it's something kink or fetish related. And of course, make sure that the two of you have a good vibe for each other and that you're comfortable. Personally, I'm only available by appointment during non-pandemic times and will probably only be available by appointment after the pandemic times and things are back to normal or whatever we're calling it.
Whatever that looks
whenever
like.
that happens, whatever that means.
I mean, I can't even think past the election right now.
Sure.
Like, I can't even go into what are things going to look like on the other side of the pandemic. I'm like, can we just get through the end of this year? My God.
Well, how have you been finding the transition to online only? Like, I recognize that you have, like, you were already kind of set up for it. You already had some understanding of how to navigate those spaces. But a lot of the sex workers I work with have been expressing to me that it just feels different. You know, and as a therapist, I can tell you I desperately miss the experience of sitting down in my office, of sharing air with people. And it, you know, we can still do beautiful work online. And I don't want to dismiss that at all. But I have to note that just on a nervous system level, it feels not the same. And there is something missing. And I'm curious what that experience has been like for you.
Yes. So I'm a big fan of body language. And online, we're limited to this: a head, the shoulders, and maybe hands that come in and out of frame on occasion. You know, maybe somebody's house cat pops up. But I mean, you are so much more limited as to how much information you're receiving about the other person that you're connecting with. Like when I'm sitting with my guests, I'm paying attention to, are their legs fidgeting? Are they feeling comfortable? What's their breath rate like? Are they having like closed body language, open body language? How are they doing emotionally? And I use that to help kind of check in with someone. And it's very difficult not having that information on the other end of things. Not to mention the fact that in terms of the actual sex work and creating content, filming content, it is not the same performing for a camera lens as it is getting to connect with an actual flesh and blood person. Like, it feels real strange to be making quote unquote eye contact with a little piece of plastic. And it's like, oh, I mean, I definitely know that I prefer my in-person type work. That's definitely where my passion is. That's where my heart lies. But you're right. We do have to make do with the options that we have available to us right now. And first and foremost, we all have a responsibility towards safety. So as much as I want to break quarantine as anyone does, I mean, you know, safety first, and there'll be time on the other side.
Yeah, I definitely get that, and I'm not advocating for any rejection of that, but I think it's just really useful as we talk about how this thing is going on and on to remind ourselves that we're missing some things, that there are pieces of our day-to-day life that we might be coming up with beautiful substitutions to, and in some ways, I'm sure that there are benefits to that we're discovering, like new and interesting sides of ourselves and of our society and wherever else. But just to, I guess, maybe honor that sacrifice a little bit and really acknowledge how different and how challenging some of those differences can really be.
I think a lot of it too is that people's needs aren't getting met, especially that of physical touch. I mean, even for the deepest of introverts, we all have some level of need for socialization, intimacy, physical contact, and that's gone from whatever normal in March was to now a 6-month-long non-existent point of contact. And I think a lot of people are getting more in touch with what their actual needs are and acknowledging the fact that no, we really do need to interact with each other, touch each other, hold each other, feel each other, as it were.
Sure.
Right. Certainly. I do have some more questions about COVID specifically and dealing with this kind of isolation that you're referencing and that lack of touch, or in some cases, if you're quarantining together, too much of it.